In this tutorial, we'll go over the performance page and the information on this page. So the performance page shows the profitability at certain points in the property's life cycle. And you'll see that there are 4 columns here. There's the underwriting column, the forecast, the pro forma actuals, and the mock-up. Let's start by talking about the underwriting. So the underwriting column basically tells you what we estimated the profitability of the property will be based on what we think the COGS, or what we think we'll spend on the property, how much we purchased it for, and what we think we'll be able to sell it for, and how many days we think we're going to hold it for. This information is just an estimate. It's basically saying at the time we purchase, what do we think profitability will be? All of the values in this column come from Fortress, and that's really important to understand. When we import a property from Fortress, the values in this column are populated by the purchasing template or the calculation template in Fortress. The second column is the forecast. So the forecast, on day 1, when we import a property into Minerva, the underwriting values that come from Fortress copy to the forecast and the pro forma actual column. The forecast changes over time. That's different than the underwriting column that never changes. So the underwriting column is a one-time calculation, and the values are set only one time when we import the property. The forecast values change as the property changes. So for example, if we estimate that we're going to hold the property for 275 days, but then we found that there's a fundamental problem with the foundation, or there's a lien on the property that we have to take care of that's taking a long time to clear, the amount of days that we're going to hold the property may increase, and that will change our profitability of the property. So when that happens, the underwriting doesn't change, but the forecast does. And the forecast values get updated based on data that's entered from these pages. So the property details page, the financing page, the relocation page, the rehab page, listings, offers, escrow, all of those pages update data in this column. That's really important to understand, because when the team goes in and they start actually working on this property and entering in data, we want to make sure that the data that's entered in these pages reflect in the forecast, and that's done by the performance calculator. So that's the forecast column. The pro forma actuals column is actually 2 data sets rolled into one column. The pro forma is just a comparison. It says what's greater, the forecast or the actual. The actual is the actual money that we've spent, that we've booked in our accounting system, either AX or D365, on that property. So for example, if we underwrote that we were going to spend $415,000, and then we bought the property and we realized that we were going to spend $416,000, the team would update the purchase cost to $416,000, and that would update this amount in the forecast. They would update it on the property details page. And then if accounting books $420,000, the pro forma will say, okay, I see that there's a $420,000 expense for property cost on this property. Is what's greater, $416,000 or $420,000? And the pro forma column would show the $420,000. So that concept is important to understand. All of the values in this column, for the most part, unless it's a calculation, which you can see by the text of the field, it's bold and black. That means it's a calculation. But these normal fields, the $50,000 rehab, property management fee, the utilities, all of these COGS are a comparison between the forecast and the actual. So that's important. The actuals get populated from AX or D365 nightly. That being said, this page is really important because it helps the team understand what decisions they're making and how that impacts profitability. The Performa column, which is what the team uses most to kind of gauge where they're at, is really trying to show you the worst case scenario. It's always going to take the greater value because it wants you to think conservatively. So you'll see that there are a few buttons down here, and these buttons represent a different action. So the Calc Save Underwriting button will recalculate this underwriting column. Only a few users have the ability to click this button. If you don't, most people don't even see it. You have to have specific access. Everyone can see the Calc Save and the Refresh Actuals. If I were to click on this button, what that will do is it will manually run the performance calculator and grab all of the most updated values for the forecast column and then do the comparison for the Performa column. If I click on Refresh Actuals, that will grab all of the most recent data from AX or D365 and populate the actuals information for this property. So that being said, when a user books an actual expense to a property, that information typically doesn't come over until I think it's about 12 a.m. at nighttime. So it runs once a day. We refresh all of the actuals at one time every day, and that's in the middle of the night. If the user wants to see the actuals sooner because they knew that something was booked, they have the ability to click on Refresh Actuals. The last column that we'll go over is the mockup, and the mockup is basically just an on-the-fly calculator for the team to be able to mess around with these numbers. So if they wanted to if they wanted to calculate some scenarios with maybe the rehab cost or the utility cost or the amount of days we'll hold the property, they can click on either the forecast or the Performa. And what those buttons will do is it will copy the data from either of these columns. So if I click on Performa, the mockup will copy the values from the Performa column into the mockup. And the team has the ability to change the sold date and to change the price and the rehab amount and all of these values. And then they can recalculate what they think the profitability will be, and then they can save it. So it's really just an on-the-fly calculator. So things to keep in mind is that the performance calculator impacts the forecast. The Performa is a comparison between the forecast and the actuals. The underwriting only is ever calculated one time, and that's during property creation. And all of these values come from Fortress. All of these values in the underwriting column come from Fortress. All of the values in the forecast on day one copy the underwriting, and then on day two and going forward are updated based on the data in the other pages. One more thing to think about is the calculations on this page are dependent on the model that's selected. So if you see in the top corner here, the model for this property is the Flip 2019 version 2 model, but we have a number of different models that a property could be assigned to. And based on the model that's selected, the categories on the performance page and the calculations change.